This is the Grassroots Education and Entertainment Network, your number one source of information, education, and entertainment. For honest, responsible, and dependable information, we stand supreme. To stay focused, inspired, and relaxed, choose green.
Aboro, Aboye, Abosheshe, Ekabo, and welcome to the traditional Herbal Health Show. And before I start, I'd like to apologize. The host would not be with us today, but nonetheless, the show would continue today. So, as usual, I'm going to begin the program by reading an essay IFA. Today's essay IFA is from Oyeku Oturapon. All right, and this essay IFA is about forgiveness. Oronmila will forgive me. The forgiving one will forgive me. If water kills a human being, it will be forgiven. Oronmila, let me be forgiven on this issue. Let all the people in the tongue forgive me with regards to this issue, like rain. In all cases, is forgiven by the community. Okay? And that is the essay IFA reading for today's show. All right. Again, let me apologize for the host of today's show, of the show. She's not able to make it today. All right, due to things beyond her control. But today we are going to discuss a book that I have. The name of the book is Traditional Medical Practitioner in Zimbabwe. All right, the subtitle is his Principles of Practice and Pharmacopoeia. All right, now I've had this book for quite some time. It's an interesting book, and I would share with you why I decided to look at this book in the show today on traditional health. This book has quite a wide variety of African herbs, right? And in some cases in the book, it makes comparison with the use of the herbs in Zimbabwe with other countries in Africa also. But what I found to be most interesting in this particular book is that this book, the herbs that are used in Zimbabwe, a lot of these herbs are also used in the Caribbean region. And that is what sort of captivated my curiosity and my interest in this particular book. All right. The I'm going to read some of the subsections of the book, right? Now it explains about the general medical practitioner, right? Among the people of Zimbabwe, the traditional medical practitioner is called a Naganga, all right, or a Nanga. All right, so the book has a section that explains what are their general practices. The other subsection deal with the principles and practice of the Nanga, right? These sections have the taboos. It also deals with the clothes they wear, the equipment they use, right? The organization of the practice, their various diagnostic methods and treatment, And it also mentions here divination by means of bones. All right. The next section covers a lot of their beliefs, their spiritual beliefs. All right. And then the last, well, that's not really the last part, but there's another section that deals with complaints of and medicine. Right. They talk about advanced practices, psychiatric practices, preventative medicine, the management of pregnant women, etc., etc. All right. Now, what sort of was very interesting to me when I started to study this book is that a lot of the herbs that we use, they use them, but they use it totally different, right? Also, in this book, not only did it give the medicinal uses, but it also gave the spiritual uses of a lot of the different herbs that were used, right? And some of the herbs that they gave the spiritual uses for were herbs that we normally use in Trinidad and in Guyana, as far as I know, and in probably some of the French speaking islands. But we use them mostly for, medical reasons. But here I was able to pick up on some of the spiritual uses for some of the herbs as used in Zimbabwe. Another thing that I learned while I was reading this book is that there are a lot of conditions that we do not consider to be a malady or a sickness here that they consider to be sicknesses over there. One of the examples I found was a condition that occurred in babies that would cause a portion of the child's head to become disfigured. I don't know if it exists here, but we probably just never paid attention to it. But to me, that was a very amazing thing, right? And then they gave the spiritual cause. It also gave the physical, the biological, and the psychosomatic cause. And of course, in this book, it also gave the remedy, right? And strangely enough, one of the causes that they gave for this condition with the babies, they said this normally occurs when one of the partners to the marriage is unfaithful. That causes the child to become sick. Because what they are saying is it seems that the energy that is picked up by the extramarital relations, when the person comes home with that energy on them, it adversely affects the child. All right, which to me makes a lot of logical sense. But just that this was the very first time I've ever heard of anything like that. Right? And even more peculiar was the solution that they suggested. They suggested that under those circumstances, there were herbs they would use to bathe the child, and there would be certain things, concoctions they would mix to rub the head, the mold of the child's head. But they also said a very, very important part of the remedy for that problem was for the guilty parent to hold the baby and speak into the child, asking for forgiveness and explaining to the child what it is that they did wrong. And they say normally this totally cures the malady, of course, with combination of the baths and the rubbing of the mold of the baby's head. All right. I saw also a few other unusual things, but I wouldn't go into all of those. Right. But the the traditional uses and the spiritual uses of many of these plants were applied, and most of them work through the forms of baths. Right. I think the last two shows we spoke about hydrotherapy, and I think as part of the discussion, it was mentioned that what we called bush baths was, which is a traditional form of treatment that is used in the region, was it also fell into the category of hydrotherapy. And we discussed the fact that The epidermis, the skin, is the largest human organ. So therefore, it is an organ. Not only does it expel unwanted things from the system, but it is also used as an organ that absorbs also. All right, you absorb things through your pores. So the bats seem to have always played a very important role in treatment, right? Well, we would now classify it in modern science as hydrotherapy. All right, so not only are herbs used orally, meaning that you take it in through some sort of drink, you take it in through a bath. There is also the steam bath, which was mentioned, and there is also the smoking or the steam production with the internal organs, which our host spoke about as a method of treatment. And then, I got into that with her about men not wanting to ever have themselves exposed to such types of treatment, right? Um, I'm looking here at a list of some of the conditions that they diagnosed in Zimbabwe. Right? I mentioned one already, but I'm gonna just go through the list of these because some of them, as I say to you, were unusual to me. They were unknown to me. All right. Um, there is one condition here that they call Chipande or Nova, right? Which basically, in brackets, they have is a depressed fontanella, which is the part of the head, right? Um, I believe this is the condition that has to do with the shape of the head. All right, I do know. I think long time when babies were born, a part of the treatment. I spoke to some Haitian traditionalists, and they would say that they would tie the baby, they would band the chest of the child, they would rub the mole of the head of the child also, and they would also, well, the song thing is a very common one where after you bathe the child, you give the child a kind of rough sort of massage, make sure all the limbs and the muscles and everything is working properly. So some of these things we may not have had the explanations for them, but they sort of were passed down as a form of tradition. So we used to do some of these things, but we never really had the African name for it. Maybe that was beaten out of us during slavery. All right. Um, the other thing that they have listed here, which is something that is sort of we see it here too, but again we don't have these names for it. The other condition here is called Chitsinga or Chipotswa. All right. This is described as a physical disorder characterized by pain or swelling or a foreign body which remains stationary. It is believed that a poison enters the body at the joints and circulate to the other parts, causing great pain. All right. Of course, they link this to some sort of spiritual activity, right? I mean, I can't say that I've ever heard that too much locally or people complain. I know most people have arthritis and rheumatism in the joints, right? And we normally don't attribute that to any spiritual cause. But here they say that forces could enter the body by the joints. And of course, they had the name that they give for it. All right. The other condition is the same name as one of them listed above. This is Chitsinger, right? And this is the name given to the complaint believed to be due to a man's steadfast refusal to marry or his lack of inclination to do so. So they view this as a condition if a man likes being a bachelor and wants to remain one. All right, a man who is a confirmed bachelor at an age when he should have married displays no interest in women and does not wish to have them in his house is said to have Chitsingha. This condition, of course, again, is attributed to some sort of a spiritual imbalance. All right, I tell you, this stuff is kind of interesting. I couldn't even make some of this stuff up. All right, after this one, there is one called Shidi. So, this is believed to be caused by ingestion of food that has been bewitched. All right, this I've heard of. We've heard of this in the Caribbean before. Right? It is characterized by a foreign body remaining stationary or moving in the alimentary canal. This is a condition which is usually attributed to witchcraft or poison planted in food. Poison is believed to have immediate effect on the victim, but the symptoms start to show after some days, weeks, or months. All right. The Nanga usually prescribe emetics to cure this complaint. All right, an emetic is something that would cause you to vomit or to bring it up. Right. Some of these things, again, this one doesn't hit me as something uncommon. It happens. We've heard of these things before in the Caribbean, right? And normally the remedy for such things locally is OBC. You know, if one believes that one was somebody has tried to poison you and is making you extremely ill, you simply get the OB you created, you put it to soak in water overnight or whatever, and you drink the water. That is one of the known solutions to poisons. All right, the next one is called hongomwa or infertility. All right, well, that's another common one. All right, this is a complaint much feared by Africans. This condition is attributed to spiritual elders. All right. And the next thing they have is Shave, which is an alien spirit or a witch. We record an instance of a woman who was unable to bear a child because a Shave or a witch wanted to possess her. In another case, a woman was rendered sterile by an angered spirit because he did not pay the Mombe Yuhumai, right? Which is they saying the cow that is normally included in the bride's wealth, which is paid to the mother of the bride. But all right, we know that in the African system, they have where a man is required to pay dowry in order to take a wife. So in this case here, they're saying that this infertility may be as a result for a man failure to fulfill some promise that is related to the dowry. All right. The next one they have listed is Mamhipo. This is a common complaint among Africans. It is believed to be caused by witchcraft or an angered spirit elder. From the complaint, in characterized in its early stage, and the victim is unlucky, right? Being hit by people without any reason, followed by madness. All right. Nanga mentioned that all forms of bad luck are due to Mamhipo. So they're saying that this condition is a condition related to bad luck. And they say it's caused by spiritual sources, right? The last one, illness or death caused by antisocial act. The Shona believe that there are certain complaints which are contracted by individuals who break certain social customs or moral or accepted social practices. This would be people who violate taboos. Taboos are rules, laws, morals, what the society expects you to function by and to follow. Right? They are saying here that people who function outside of these include adultery, pregnant mother suckling her infant, a man having intercourse with a menstruating woman, um, one bleeding after an abortion, or a woman who has passed the menopause. Failure to pay a midwife service, or a stranger touching an infant other than her own when she is menstruating. Right? And the following they give examples. But in the diaspora, we don't believe in too many of these things. Whether they in fact affect people, we are uncertain. Sometimes you come across clients or people who you assist verbally, and you would find that it doesn't matter what type of herbal remedy or treatment you try to apply, sometimes you would find you would not have success, right? For me, and for many modern practitioners of traditional health, what we tend to try to do is we tend to try to blend modern science together with traditional science. Kind of gone are the days when somebody would just come to you and say, "Listen, I have a pain here. What I could get for that?" And you just go and you make up a concoction and you give them. Most modern practitioners of the tradition do not really do stuff in that haphazard way. What we tend to do is people who come to us, we tend to ask them for copies of their medical records. We tend to take information concerning their medical history. And then, based on these information, once we could ascertain specifically what is the condition of the person, what was the diagnosis, and in some cases, even what was the prognosis, what plans the medical doctor may have had for treating the person, or even what treatment they have administered that was not successful. All right. Let me just give a brief disclaimer. We're not medical doctors. We're not giving medical advice. This is for information purpose only. If a person is extremely ill, we always recommend you seek medical attention. And you try to follow all the protocols given by your medical doctor. Right? That is the disclaimer that I forgot to give at the beginning of the show, which the host normally does. So forgive me, that's why I probably forgot to do it. Right? But I was just outlining, you know, this is some of the things that we do. All right. So any person who might be online and have a question, they could simply put it in the comment section and I would respond to it. That sort of might help the program go along, the 1 hour to go along a lot faster. I noticed that already in the half an hour zone. All right. Now, the next section of the book goes into psychiatric practices. All right. Because, of course, in most traditional societies, they may not have access to all of the modern or contemporary facilities and treatment and specialists and all these type of things that we who live in the diaspora have. And even in some parts of the Americas and some parts of the diaspora, still to get these services, one has to travel very far and one also has to have money, right? So, in a lot of cases, a lot of these psychiatric problems and all of these things are still referred to by the local herbalist or the traditional medicinal practitioner or the shaman or whoever the person is. So they have to attend to physical disease, spiritual problems, psychiatric problems, etc., etc., etc. Right? I am not going to read all that is in this book. right? But I could probably talk just a little bit on some of the issues of what we classify as psychiatric disorders, right? In some cases, it might be spiritual. In some cases, it could be biological because the functioning of our entire system depends heavily on our glands or the organs in our endocrine system. And sometimes, when one or two of these glands malfunction, and all these glands produce chemicals that enter into your bloodstream, whenever there is a hormonal imbalance, such a thing could also affect a person's um, mind because the chemicals are not balanced properly and it does not flow with the correct balance of chemicals. All right. Beside this, you would have issues such as auto poisoning. People who follow very bad diets where they eat a lot of processed food and foods laced with chemicals. Sometimes these chemicals cause the system to go haywire, right, and the body chemistry to be off. Um, Another common thing that interferes with the balances in human beings is the induction of heavily acidic medication sometimes, right? And me being a former trained pharmacy assistant who worked in a hospital pharmacy, I worked at the Long Island College Hospital Pharmacy for a while. I've been able to see firsthand how a lot of these medicines, particularly the ones that are highly concentrated with acidic chemicals, how it affects the human body and the mind also. I've come to realize after some years that it is not always um, the best thing, particularly if people find themselves to be medicated for extremely prolonged periods of time. You know, if you get on a medication and it's to provide some measure of release during the process of healing, this is excellent. Once the duration of time is short, then you could get off the medication. Everything is going to be just good. But if you have to be on for a very prolonged period of time, sometimes a lot of damages could be could be incurred as a result of that. But in most instances, when doctors prescribe medicines that they know are very harsh, what they generally do from time to time, they would bring you in and they would do particular types of tests to determine whether or not the side effects of the medication is too much for you to handle. This is why a lot of times too they change medication. All right, all right, and this is that I'm speaking now from a professional, from a trained professional view, not just as a traditional, so a traditional. All right. Um, while I was going through the book, right? Of course, this book was based on the Zimbabwe traditional practices. I was able to identify quite a few of the local herbs that was also used in Zimbabwe. And as I mentioned earlier, excuse me, many of those herbs, in fact, grow in the Caribbean region, right? And a lot of those that don't grow here in Trinidad in particular, I know many of them grow in Guyana in South America. All right. I was able to learn this in my travels to Guyana, right? And while I was there, I was able to visit quite a few herbalists. And when they took me around and they were showing me plants, I was able to identify some of the plants that grew here. But a lot of the different herbs that they showed me, a lot of them do not grow in Trinidad. All right, and that's of course um, Venezuela is right next to Trinidad, and Guyana is right next to Venezuela, and they are in South America. So Trinidad happens to be the most southerly isles of the entire Caribbean. And because of this, Trinidad has a unique flora, fauna, and wildlife. Because South America ends supposedly based on geography, where Trinidad um, annexes to Venezuela, it is believed that South America begins somewhere between Trinidad and Venezuela. But for those who have studied botany and herbs and uh, zoology and animals and wildlife, I have learned that it appears that because of our proximity to Venezuela or to South America, that we have some plants that are South American plants growing in Trinidad. We have some form of wildlife that is from South America in Trinidad, right? And also, we have a few exotic species of both plants and animals in Trinidad because of the intermingling of wildlife with the North American wildlife and the South American wildlife. And we would seem to have had probably cross pollination of plants, similarly, that produced unusual species of plants. All right. No, I mean, I ain't trying to be no technical. I'm just trying to, express a few things this week. That's some things that we wouldn't probably normally discuss on a show, right? Um, Many researchers visit Trinidad for a lot of these exotic, to see some of these animals that is not known to exist in other parts of the world. Some of these species are plants. This is well, I could talk more about plants. I know more about plants than animals. I'm not no zoologist, right? But from research and practice with herbs, I've discovered that we have similar plants to what grows in North America. We have similar plants to what grows in South America also. But some of the types we have here is unique only to Trinidad. All right. So even as far as the chemical composition of the plants and being able to utilize these plants, what makes the way traditionalists in Trinidad use some of these plants differently from others in the Caribbean who would have from the same family of plant, we may use it differently because they have slightly different properties. All right. The soil maybe, the environment maybe, the location maybe also plays a part in that. All right. But I'm going to now sort of run through a couple of the plants, right? And I would explain one of the aspects of research that a lot of herbalists do. Um, One of the things we know is from island to island, and from country to country, the names of the plants are not the same. In Trinidad, we happen to be fortunate in this way. Well, I mean, I don't know if it's really called colonialism. I don't know if it's really good fortune, but we have benefited for people who are involved in this. In Trinidad, at one time, we were heavily influenced by the French. Okay, so a lot of the local herbs carries French names. Some of the local herbs also carry African names. Some of the herbs have Indian names. Some of them have Spanish names. But for people who are involved heavily in herbs, what we generally do is the only thing that standardizes the names for all the herbs everywhere in the world, with no exception, is the Latin names of the plants. So whenever we're doing research and we're trying to find out about a plant, and we order a book from Guyana, or we order a book from Grenada, or Martinique, or Guadeloupe, or St. Martin, or wherever, what we do is we don't just look for the book that has the local names. We look for the books that would also have both the local as well as the Latin name. So it would mean whenever we're doing research in any language, whether it's Chinese, Japanese, whatever, we look for the Latin name and we are able to identify the species of plant based on the Latin name. All right. I could give more history into that. I would give just a little more, and then I would stop that technical stuff and go straight into the plants. The last thing I would want to say on that note about the names of the plants and all of that is that Latin was the language of the Moors. The Moors were the ones who navigated the seven seas and did all of the trade around the world. So, in their travels all around the world, they were able to gather information in all sorts of different languages and put it together and record everything in Latin. So, as a result of the influence of their traveling and their trading and everything, practically all of the scientific disciplines that are known in academia uses Latin as its standard. And I'm going to stop all the fancy talk and all the technical talk with that. And I'll go now into the book. The only thing is now, the names that I'm going to be reading here are in Latin, right? So for some of the technical people, you all would know exactly which local plant it is, whether in St. Martin, Trinidad, Guadeloupe, Grenada, Guyana, wherever, right? However, some of them I could say offhand what is the local Trinidad name for the plant. All right. Now, one of the things is this. Although I found many plants in common, what I've also discovered is that the genus of the plant that grows in Ghana is not the exact species that grows here. All right. And my explanation previously about cross pollination and about soil and about various things may have contributed to some of these differences because plants tend to adapt itself somewhat to the soil and the environment that it's in. So because of that, it may take on some characteristics that would be totally different from the first plants that were actually planted here. All right. And that would be, of course, with the exception of plants that are indigenous to Trinidad or to wherever you are. All right. One of the first one mentioned here is Albizia. All right. Second one is aloe. I think aloe is a very common plant in many countries, but there are so many different species of aloes. Right. Annona senegalis, and then there is Aristolochia hepi. All right. The albizia plant, some people know it as neem. Some people know aloe as aloe vera. Um, the Aristolochia in Trinidad, there are two types. We have the matroot, and we also have what is called the treff. All right, they are both vine-like. They are both extremely bitter. The matroot has a miniature root almost within the shape of a yam or cassava, and it grows just in the same manner, like on a vine and below the soil. Right? The treff, however, is also like a vine, but it is the leaves are totally different in shape from the matroot. And also one of the characteristic things about the treff plant is that there are little worms that appear on the plant every year and they eat all the leaves. All right. The next thing we have here is Bohemia toningi. All right, that grows here also. That's a vine, a very long, fat vine. Some people call it monkey steps. Some people call it monkey ladder. This also grows in South America too. All right, this is a very common plant in Trinidad in the forest. You can easily identify it and you would understand why they call it monkey ladder because it looks like the ladders that a monkey would climb on. And I think in the areas where there are populations of monkey, they probably normally use these vines quite a bit. All right, the next two is Dalbergia melanoxylon and Datura stramonium. All right, the Dalbergia I believe grows in South America. We don't have too many of that here, but the Datura stramonium, we have that here. And I think that particular plant, which is known as the datura, that came with the Indian immigrants when they came to Trinidad. It is a plant that is used a lot by the religious sect, the pundits, and them, or highly religious Hindus. You would see this plant in their front yard. It would normally have either a white flower or it may have a purple shade flower. And then the seeds grow up into a ball almost shaped like the human brain with some prickles on it. When that fruit matures and dries up, the seeds are inside of it. All right. The next one on the list that we have here is the Erythrina abyssinica. All right. Don't ask me. I don't even remember which one that is. But I will move on to the next one. Then you have Lantana angolensis. Right. The lantana plant we have in Trinidad was called the Lantana camara. That particular plant is the kayaki plant. All right. The most common one has a red and yellow or orangish flower, and it bears a very little seed on it. All right. That's a very commonly known plant. Sometimes you would see some with some pink flowers, yellow flowers. There are all varieties of this, and the leaves gives off a very strong odor, so it's pretty easy to identify. All right, the next one here on the list is Lipa javonica. Here we have something called Lipa alba. All right, I don't want to talk about that, but that is called is a plant that is used by men. Is used for the scalp and different things. The leaf has a slightly bitter taste. It's a very long, narrow leaf. I don't remember the local name for it. Then we have Melia azedara, which is also another family to name. Then we have Psidium guajava, which is guavas, right? We enjoy the fruit here. It's a very nice tasting tropical fruit. We also use the leaves for tea. And I could remember when I was now becoming an adolescent and my body odor started to be really strong. My mother would say, when you go to take a bath, take some guava leaf and rub it under your arm. So that was one of the uses of guava leaves. But guava leaves have many uses. They're high in iron. All right. They contain a lot of iron and folic acid and a couple other minerals. All right. Then we have Sesamum angustifolium, which is what we know as sesame seed. We have Strychnos coccoloids. I know they have this in South America. Not sure we have it here. Terminalia sericea, South America. Vanonia Magdalena, which is called the African bitter leaf. A lot of people locally know that plant. All right. And then we have the Vanonia glabra or glabra, right? I learned about this one when I visited Guyana. The herbal doctors pointed it out to me. I know the plant locally, but I never knew that it was used for having medicinal and healing properties. Um, in Guyana, they call this plant inflammation bush as one of the names. Another name for it is also information bush, man information bush, or woman information bush. This particular herb is also a very, very effective bush for removing inflammation, right? Just as it's called inflammation bush, right? Then the last one on this part of the list is Zingiber officinale, which is ginger. Of course, everybody knows that plant. All right, so here is what I'm going to close this book. All right, it was sort of interesting. I just wanted to introduce you all to some of the little ideas and whatever that is practiced by the traditional people of Zimbabwe. All right, and we have 15 more minutes, so I'm just going to talk a little bit maybe about local herbs and some of their uses and application. One of the herbs that I saw in here was the guava leaf. All right. Now, guava leaf it has a lot of medicinal properties. All right. One of the things is that guava does is it reduces your blood sugar level. So you would find persons who has high blood sugar to use the guava leaf. Cannot use too much of it. I'm not going to recommend no dosage and none of that. Please go to your local herbalist. Let them tell you exactly how it is used. But it is used for high blood sugar. It is also used to increase sperm count in men. It is also used for women who are anemic. Okay? And in a lot of cases where women suffer from anemia, a lot of times it might be. Again, remember what I said earlier, we would normally ask for medical records to make a determination. We would ask for blood tests and various type of test results. Yeah, in the case of anemia, a lot of women have parasitic infection, and one particular parasite normally we look for is something called the hookworm. Guava leaves tend to destroy hookworms. And in the guava leaf, you would also find not just the iron, but you're going to also find all the other related minerals that would cause the iron to be properly absorbed into the blood. And while I said this, I want to point out that as being an important part of most traditional practice regime. Most traditional practice, most people who practice traditional medicine and have some modern training, meaning they are familiar with chemistry and biology and various other sciences, would know that natural foods and particular herbs that are used in medicine, when treating a particular condition, we would look for certain chemical substances in the herbs, as well as we would also look for certain nutritional elements like vitamin, minerals, and trace elements. One of the most fantastic things is that Olodumare, God, when he designed these plants, he designed these plants in such a way that they are made for our body to absorb them. So in any herb or any plant, there wouldn't only be one vitamin or one mineral. It will have a balanced combination in order for the herb to be absorbed into your system and for it to fulfill its purpose. So therefore, even though I speak of the iron in guava leaves, there are other things that are there that would ensure that your body takes in the iron properly. All right. Now remember, even in the case of herbal medicine, normally if you go to an experienced herbalist, they wouldn't just give you a medicine and say to you, listen, this will cure your condition. Normally they would tell you there are things that you would need to do. You may need to modify your diet. You might need to adjust your lifestyle. You might need to start exercising. You might need to go out in the sun. You might need to sleep with your window open in order to absorb a certain amount of oxygen and also to ensure that the air that you let out during the course of the night that it goes out of the room so that your body would be able to absorb fresh oxygen. Of course, from the plants, if you have plants outside your window, and if you live in a nice country area where there are many trees. But unfortunately, the reality is many of us do not have that, right? So it's now 50 minutes. So I'm not going to go for the full hour because the host of the show normally runs for 45 minutes. So I'm now 5 minutes over. So I would now like to thank all the viewers for being with us this week, and hopefully by next week, your host will be back and we will continue this show, the traditional herbal health show. Thanks for viewing, and I would like to say, Udabo.